Um, Sometimes my thoughts are so deep that I sink and drown myself in them, which means that my deepest thoughts are kind of stupid also, because as above, so below, so say the Hermeticists. And I would like to give as much honesty that I can, express my thoughts about the war in Ukraine, the nuclear threat, um, and some thoughts that I've had. Um, Neil Walsh said in his conversation with God that fate means from all thoughts everywhere. And Nietzsche said that you gotta love your fate. So if you connect the dots, it means that you have to love all thoughts coming from everywhere. And from a transcendental point of view, all thoughts coming from everywhere are the thoughts of mankind, which are the thoughts of God not yet being conscious of himself. And whatever men think, they are not free to think what they think. It is God who thinks through them, and they don't know it. So to be God is to love all thoughts from everywhere, including the one you don't like. Because if you realize the unity with God, you understand that these thoughts coming from everywhere are your own thoughts. And you have to understand that all the thoughts ever made existent come from God. And if you want to realize the unity with God, you have to understand, because true love comes from understanding. I had understood that true love means full understanding. And absolute knowing, absolute understanding is absolute love. And um, I would like to remind myself and anyone that the ancient Greeks believed that the poets were divinely inspired, that a poet was not expressing his own individual self, but it was the gods that were speaking through the poet. And my view, which is Hegel's view, is that modern artists, all of them, but especially in modern pop culture, the music that everyone loves, it's not the artist who sings in his songs or her songs. It is the spirit, and there is only one spirit, which expresses itself through them. And I will read some lyrics from Eminem's song Rap God. Ooh, suma luma duma luma, you assuming I'm a human. So in a kind of transcendent, not transcendental, but transcendent state, Eminem understood himself as not being the author of his own lyrics at this moment, but it was divinely inspired. What I gotta do to get it through to you? I'm superhuman. So he unconsciously understood that it was absolute spirit talking through himself. Innovative, and I'm made of rubber so that anything you say is ricocheting off of me and it will glue to you. And this is what the Christians mean that when they say that Jesus said you should not judge, because to judge the other, whatever you judge, you will be judged. When you say anything about anyone else or anything else or anyone, this other will judge you in return. And in my intellectual process and spiritual process, I've made a lot of judgments about many topics. I've hated many people, including myself. And I understand from an abstract point of view that whatever I said will come back at me. And the most difficult task that I will have to accomplish is to recognize my own thoughts in the thoughts of the other, and to love my own thoughts through the mediation of the other. And let me take an example to clarify. Right now, Vladimir Putin is described as evil incarnate. And he's alone against the whole world. And evil is that which stands alone in opposition to the whole world, what Hegel calls the negative. And I identified with the negative because, in my view, I am a subject opposing an objective world and being separated from the objectivity of the world. And yeah. So I feel a lot of empathy, which is kind of irrational, but it's not that I have empathy, although I do, but at least I understand Vladimir Putin, because I understand that his position will soon be my position. So I kind of understand him, and which kind of makes me a monster already, because who would defend Vladimir Putin except the most crazy fanatical whatever. But yeah, and there's a phenomenon which has happened recently. I read the news every day, and Zemmour, Éric Zemmour, the French candidate to the French presidential election, in the news that I bought this morning, there was a list of all the quotes that he made about Vladimir Putin. He admired Vladimir Putin, and Zemmour was the first author that I read in 2016, which separated me from my then leftist worldview and brought me into right-wing worldview. And he's a Jew, and he talked about Islam and so on. So he was my first mentor in the dark arts, so to speak. If you say that the left is the light and the right is the dark, or the right-wingers say the opposite, that the left are in darkness and the right is in the light, but that's quite complicated. So I know him, and he's become a candidate for the French presidential election, and his thoughts are coming back at him now. He's accused of having praised Putin, not that Putin is the evil guy. And there's another example, French of Italian origin video YouTube maker who supported another French candidate, whatever, and he discovered that there were pictures of him and speeches of him where he was praising National Socialism, and it glued to him. His own thoughts came back at him, and he decided to laugh about it, because it's difficult to assume and to accept your own thoughts. And this is what the Christian call the final judgment. The final judgment is that everyone, and in the absolute there is only one, because in the absolute we are all one, but there's only one subject perceiving the substance, and the final judgment will be all your thoughts coming back at you. And I understand from an abstract point of view that all the things that I ever thought will come back at me, and I will have the difficult task of not only accepting but understanding, and even more difficult, of loving my own twisted thoughts. Because it's very easy to love what is good and noble and beautiful. It's much more difficult to love the ugliness and the insanity and the evil. So I understand my purpose, and I made videos in which I said that Vladimir Putin was not free. So this is also a movement of a process of salvation, because through an attempt to save myself, in which I am being very selfish, but I understood also that humans are selfish because they are made in the image of God, and God is kind of selfish because he only loves himself through the mediation of another, but that's something else. But by trying to save myself from my own thoughts, I will justify and bring the philosophical proof that all the evil persons that you can think of were determined by eternal logical necessity to think to think the things they thought. And I've explained in some of my previous video that Vladimir Putin had no responsibility because he's not free. Only God is free. And to be absolutely free is to understand everything and to love everything. And it is the most difficult thing to do. And it is so difficult that only God can do it. That's what I had to say.